I am Joshua, 32, and my parents threw a champagne party to celebrate my grandfather's death while I was sitting right next to him. Before I tell you about the moment the police dragged my brother out of the boardroom in handcuffs, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. My phone buzzed against the mahogany surface of my desk at exactly 9:15 a.m. It was a Tuesday. The morning sun was cutting through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Henderson Global's headquarters in downtown Chicago, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I was reviewing the quarterly logistics reports, a mundane task that usually required my full attention, but the name on the caller ID made my stomach turn over. Dad. My father, Richard, never called me during work hours. In fact, he rarely called me at all unless he needed money or wanted to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. I stared at the screen for a moment, the vibration rattling a calm rhythm against the wood. I knew what this was about. I picked up, keeping my voice neutral. "Hello, Dad." "He's gone," my father said. There was no greeting, no preamble. His voice wasn't sad. It wasn't heavy with the weight of loss that a son should feel when his father passes. It was light, airy. It sounded like he had just won a bet. The old man kicked the bucket an hour ago. Massive heart attack. I didn't say anything immediately. I held the phone away from my ear slightly because a sharp, piercing sound was coming through the speaker. It was the sound of a cork popping. Then the fizz of liquid hitting glass. Then laughter. My mother's voice cut through the background noise, sharp and distinct. "Finally! Oh my God! Finally! Pour me another one, Caleb. The nightmare is over." I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't grief. I knew something they didn't. It was pure, unadulterated disgust. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady, Are you drinking champagne?" "We're celebrating the future, Joshua," he snapped, his tone shifting instantly from giddy to aggressive. "And speaking of the future, you need to pack your things." "Pack my things?" "You heard me. The business belongs to your brother now. It's Caleb's birthright. We all know the old man only kept you around out of pity because you couldn't make it on your own. But now the charity work is over." I could hear the smile in his voice. It was a greasy, satisfied sound. "You're fired, Joshua. Hand over your keys to security. We'll be there in 20 minutes to take possession of the office." "You want me to leave right now?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Without a transition period? The logistics division is in the middle of a merger negotiation. If I leave, the deal collapses." "Let it collapse," Caleb shouted from the background. I could picture him perfectly, wearing a designer suit that cost more than my first car, holding a crystal flute, his face flushed with unearned victory. "I don't care about logistics, Joshua. I care about the assets. We're selling the shipping arm anyway. Liquidating. Cash out. I'm buying the island." "The island," I repeated, dullness seeping into my tone. "You're selling a 40-year legacy to buy an island." "It's my company now," Caleb sneered, his voice closer to the phone, like he had snatched it from our father. "Mom said the lawyers are already drafting the paperwork. Grandpa didn't update his will in 10 years. It all goes to Dad, and Dad is giving it to me. You get nothing. Maybe the old Toyota. That seems your speed." "Actually," my mother chimed in, her voice slurring slightly, "we should sell the Toyota too. Cover the funeral costs. No reason to dip into our inheritance for a hole in the ground." The sheer malice of it took my breath away. They weren't just greedy. They were vindictive. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to strip me down to the bone and kick me into the street, and they were laughing while they did it. I looked across my desk. Sitting in the high-backed leather guest chair, sipping a cup of black coffee, was Arthur Henderson. My grandfather. He was wearing his favorite navy pinstripe suit, a red silk handkerchief in the pocket. He looked tired, yes. His eyes had deep bags under them, and his hands trembled slightly when he lifted the mug. But he was very much alive. He had heard every word. I had put the phone on speaker the moment I picked up. Grandpa Arthur's face was unreadable, carved from granite. He stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake coiled on my desk. He didn't blink. He just listened to his son, his daughter-in-law, and his other grandson plan the dismantling of his life's work and the destruction of my livelihood. "You there, Joshua?" Dad barked. "Don't go crying on us. Be a man for once. Leave the keys on the desk. And don't steal any staplers on your way out." "I'm here," I said. "I'm just processing." "Process it outside," Caleb laughed. "See you in 20 minutes, little brother. I want that corner office smelling like bleach before I sit in it. Get his scent out of there." The line went dead. Silence descended on the office. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Outside the window, the Chicago traffic hummed. A world completely unaware of the bomb that had just detonated in my life. I looked at Grandpa. "They're coming." He set his coffee mug down. The ceramic clicked against the coaster, a sharp sound in the quiet room. He took a deep breath, and for a second he looked all of his 80 years. He looked like a man whose heart was breaking, not physically, but emotionally. "They didn't even ask," Grandpa whispered. His voice was gravelly. "They didn't ask what hospital I was in. They didn't ask if I suffered. They didn't ask when the funeral is." "No," I said softly. "They didn't. They went straight for the champagne," he said, his eyes hardening. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, terrifying fury. It was the look he used to wear when he was negotiating hostile takeovers in the 90s. The look that made competitors sweat through their shirts. "They are popping corks over my corpse. They think the will defaults to Dad," I said, standing up and walking over to the window. I needed to see the street. I needed to see them coming. "They think you never signed the amendments. They think a lot of things," Grandpa said, standing up. He smoothed his jacket. He didn't need a cane today. Adrenaline was holding him upright. "They think I'm dead. They think you're weak. They think this company is a piggy bank." He walked over to my desk and pressed the intercom button. "Clara?" "Yes, Mr. Henderson?" His secretary's voice came through, clear and professional. She was the only other person who knew. "They're on their way," Grandpa said. "Initiate the protocol." "Understood, sir. Security is ready. Mr. Tanaka and the board members are assembling in the main conference room. Should I let your family up when they arrive?" "Let them up," Grandpa said. "Roll out the red carpet. Let them think they've won. I want them to sit in the chair. I want them to touch the stationery. I want them to feel the power they think they have." "And then?" Clara asked. "And then?" Grandpa looked at me, a grim smile touching the corners of his mouth. "Joshua and I will go down there and remind them who built this house." I checked my watch. 9:22 a.m. "Are you ready for this?" I asked him. "It's going to be ugly. Mom is... she's in rare form." "Joshua," Grandpa said, walking to the door of the private restroom attached to my office to hide until the right moment. "I spent 40 years building Henderson Global. I fought unions, I fought recessions, I fought the government. Do you think I'm afraid of my own disappointing son and his harpy of a wife?" He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "I'm not sad anymore, son. I'm just ready to take out the trash." He closed the door. I sat back down at my desk. I pulled a file forward, the real quarterly reports, and pretended to read. But my eyes were fixed on the elevator lights down the hall, visible through my glass walls. 10 minutes later, the elevator dinged. The doors slid open and my family stepped out. They looked like they were walking a runway. Caleb was wearing sunglasses indoors. My mother was wearing a fur coat, despite it being 60 degrees in October. My father was clutching a briefcase like it contained the nuclear codes. They didn't look like mourners. They looked like conquerors. Caleb spotted me through the glass. He grinned, a predatory showing of teeth, and strutted toward my door. He didn't knock. He just shoved it open, the heavy glass swinging back and hitting the stopper with a loud thud. "I told you to clear out," Caleb said, walking straight to the guest chair, the warm chair Grandpa had just vacated, and throwing his legs over the armrest. "Why is your trash still on my desk?" It's not your desk yet, Caleb, I said, not looking up from my papers. It is legally, Dad said, stepping in behind him. He looked around the office, evaluating the furniture like an auctioneer. Everything here is part of the estate, and as the sole executor, I'm ordering you to vacate the premises. Security is on the way up to escort you out if you don't move. Mom walked over to the shelf where I kept a framed photo of me and Grandpa fishing. She picked it up, looked at it with a sneer, and dropped it into the trash can. The glass shattered. Oops, she said, not looking at me. Clumsy me. Well, out with the old, right? My blood boiled, but I kept my face blank. That was unnecessary. What's unnecessary is you still breathing my air, Caleb said. He leaned forward, snatching the report from my hands. Logistics? Boring. First thing I'm doing is firing the whole department. We'll outsource it. Save a fortune. That goes into my bonus. You can't outsource logistics, I said calmly. It's the backbone of the company. If you do that, quality control drops and we lose the Amazon contract. I don't care about the Amazon contract, Caleb yelled, slamming his hand on the desk. I care about the salary cap. You're making what? 200 grand a year? That's my money now. That's my Ferrari payment. Is that all this is to you? I asked, looking at Dad. A Ferrari payment? Grandpa built this place from a garage. He employed 3,000 people. And he's dead, Dad shouted, his face turning red. He's dead. And I'm alive. It's my turn. I waited 50 years for him to die. 50 years of being told I wasn't good enough. Well, who's sitting in the big chair now, huh? Actually, I said, glancing at the restroom door, you're standing, and Caleb is sitting in the guest chair. Get out, Mom shrieked. She pointed a manicured finger at the door. Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my suit jacket. I picked up my phone. You know, I said, before I go, there's one thing I need to do. I need to introduce you to the real owner of Henderson Global. I'm the owner, Dad roared. I pressed the intercom button. Mr. Henderson? They're ready for you. Caleb laughed. Who are you talking to? The ghost? Is he haunting the bathroom? The restroom door clicked. The handle turned. My family froze. They turned their heads in unison, like deer hearing a twig snap. The door swung open. Arthur Henderson stepped out. He stood tall, his shoulders squared, his eyes blazing with a fire that could melt steel. He didn't say a word. He just walked into the center of the room and stood there. Mom gasped. It was a wet, choking sound. She stumbled back, clutching her pearls. Dad's face went white, not pale white, like a sheet of paper. He dropped his briefcase. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Caleb scrambled backward in the chair, tangling his legs and falling onto the floor with a crash. He scrambled away on his hands and knees like a crab. Dad? My father stammered. But the hospital, they called. No one called you, Richard, Grandpa said. His voice was low, but it filled the room. You assumed, you wished, and you celebrated. We were just... Mom tried to speak, but her voice failed her. You were just picking the bones, Grandpa finished for her. He looked down at Caleb, who was cowering on the carpet. Get up, boy. You look pathetic. You want to be a CEO? Stand up. Caleb stood up, shaking. Grandpa, we thought. We were just trying to protect the company. Protect it. Grandpa walked over to the trash can. He reached in, ignoring the broken glass, and pulled out the photo of us fishing. He brushed off the shards carefully. By firing the only person who knows how to run it. By outsourcing the core division. By buying an island. He looked at them one by one. I have spent the last 6 months wondering if I was too hard on you, Grandpa said. I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I should have given you more of a chance. But today you showed me exactly who you are. He walked over to my desk and stood beside me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. And you showed me who Joshua is. Grandpa reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the desk. It landed with a heavy slap. This is the real will, Grandpa said. Or rather, the trust agreement. But we'll get to that in the boardroom. The board is waiting. And so are the police. Police, Dad squeaked. You didn't think I'd let you get away with what you've been doing to the accounts for the last 2 years, did you? Grandpa smiled, but it was a shark smile. Oh yes, we checked the books, Richard. We checked them all. To understand why my family looked like they had seen a demon, you have to understand the history of the golden child and the spare. I was the spare. Caleb was the gold. The dynamic started before we were even born, I think. My father, Richard, was a disappointment to Grandpa Arthur. Dad wasn't bad exactly, he was just mediocre. He wanted the prestige of the Henderson name without the 12-hour workdays. Grandpa, a man who built an empire from dirt, couldn't respect that. So when Dad had sons, he projected all his insecurity onto us. Caleb, the firstborn, was anointed the savior. He was handsome, charming, and loud. He was everything Dad wished he was. I came along 2 years later, quiet, bookish, observant. Dad looked at me and saw the work he didn't want to do. The defining moment, the moment I knew I would never be family in their eyes, was my 18th birthday. It was a joint celebration. Caleb was turning 20, I was turning 18. We were in the driveway of the sprawling family estate in Lake Forest. For my champion, Dad had announced, beaming. He gestured to the driveway. A brand new Porsche 911 sat there, gleaming in silver, a giant red bow on the hood. To get you to your classes in style. Caleb, who was failing 3 out of 4 classes at the local community college, whooped and jumped into the driver's seat. He revved the engine, the sound tearing through the quiet neighborhood. I stood there, smiling politely, waiting for my turn. I didn't expect a car, maybe a watch, or some help with my tuition for the engineering program I had been accepted into. And for Joshua, Mom said, handing me a box. It was heavy. I opened it. It was a set of luggage. You'll need these, Dad said, clapping me on the shoulder. Now that you're 18, it's time to find your own way. We're cutting the cord. Sink or swim, son. It builds character. I looked at the luggage. Then I looked at the Porsche. You're kicking me out? I asked. Encouraging you, Mom corrected. We need the extra room. Caleb needs a home office for his studies. That night, I packed the luggage. I didn't cry. I felt a strange sense of relief. I realized then that I didn't owe them anything anymore. I moved into a studio apartment the size of a closet. I took a job at the Henderson Global Warehouse on the south side, not as a manager, but as a forklift operator. Dad didn't know. He never checked. But Grandpa knew. Grandpa Arthur started showing up at the warehouse. At first, I thought he was inspecting the facility, but he would always end up at my station. You stack those pallets better than the veterans, he'd say. Or, you noticed the inefficiency in the loading dock schedule, didn't you? For 5 years, I worked my way up. Forklift driver, shift supervisor, logistics coordinator, assistant manager, then finally VP of operations. I earned every promotion. I took night classes to get my degree. I didn't take a dime of allowance. Meanwhile, Caleb crashed the Porsche. Then he crashed the replacement BMW. Then he dropped out of college. Dad hired him as a consultant with a salary of $150,000 a year. His job description was mostly taking clients to lunch and buying golf clubs on the company card. The resentment built up in me like sediment in a river, layer by layer. But I kept my head down. I had Grandpa. Then came the fake death plan. Started 6 months ago. I was working late as usual. Grandpa walked into my office, closing the door and locking it. We have a leak, he said. No hello. A leak. Someone is selling our bid data to VexCorp, he said. VexCorp was our biggest rival. We've lost 3 major government contracts in a row. They underbid us by exactly 1% every time. That's not luck. That's espionage. Who has access to the bid data? I asked. The executive board. Me. You. He paused. And the consultant, Caleb? I frowned. Caleb doesn't even know how to read a P&L statement, Grandpa. How would he know what data to sell? He doesn't need to know what it is to sell it, Grandpa sighed. He looked old then. He has gambling debts, Joshua. Big ones. Underground ones. How do you know? Because your mother came to me asking for an advance on my estate, he said, disgust curling his lip. She said it was for medical bills. I hired a private investigator. Caleb owes sharks in Vegas almost $2 million. I let out a low whistle. $2 million? Dad doesn't have that kind of liquidity. No, Grandpa said. But the company does. That was the night we hatched the plan. Grandpa suspected they were already dipping into the funds. But he needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. And he needed to know how far they would go. I need to die, Grandpa said calmly. Excuse me. Metaphorically. I need to disappear. I need to be incapacitated. I want to see what they do when the lion is away from the den. Will they try to save the pride? Or will they eat the cubs? So we set it up. Grandpa retired to his private cabin for health reasons. He stopped coming to the office. He stopped answering their calls. We let rumors spread that his heart was failing. The reaction was immediate. Dad started demanding power of attorney. Mom started calling the lawyers about the will. And Caleb? Caleb started showing up at the office more often, but not to work. He was logging into terminals, downloading files. 2 days ago, Grandpa looked at me and said, "It's time for the final test, the nuclear option. You want me to tell them you died?" I said, "I want you to tell them I died." He nodded. "And then I want you to invite them to the office. They'll destroy everything, Grandpa. You know that. The moment they think you're gone, they'll gut the place." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," he said. "I need them to commit the crime, Joshua. I can't fire my own son for being incompetent. The board won't allow it. It looks like a family feud. But if I catch them embezzling, if I catch them destroying the company, then I can cut them out. Legally. Permanently. It's dangerous," I warned. "Psychologically. Seeing your own family celebrate your death. You can't unsee that." "I've seen enough," Grandpa said. "I just want to secure the future. Your future." Back in the office, standing over my cowering brother, the memory of that conversation played in my head. Grandpa hadn't just predicted this. He had scripted it. "Joshua," Grandpa said, snapping me back to the present. He pointed to the computer. "Clara is waiting for the signal. The board meeting is in 30 minutes. We have work to do." I looked at Dad, who was still stammering. You can't prove anything," Dad said, trying to regain some composure. He stood up, smoothing his suit, trying to look like the CEO he would never be. "So we were happy you died. That's not a crime. It's emotional relief. You were abusive." "Abusive?" Grandpa laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. "I gave you a job you didn't earn, a house you didn't pay for, and a life you didn't deserve. And you call that abuse? You're about to learn what the real world looks like, Richard." "Get out," I said to them. "Go to the conference room. Wait for the board meeting. You can't order us around." Caleb spat, standing up. "I'm still the consultant. I have a contract." "We'll discuss your contract in the meeting," Grandpa said. "Now move, before I have security drag you down the hall." They left. They shuffled out of the office, stripped of their arrogance but clutching their entitlement like a shield. Mom shot me a look of pure venom as she passed. "You think you've won," she hissed. "But we're still family. A judge will never let you cut us out completely. We have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," I muttered under my breath. Once they were gone, Grandpa slumped slightly. The adrenaline was fading. "Are you okay?" I asked, guiding him to the chair. "No," he said honestly. "That was harder than I thought. Your mother throwing that picture away." I know. But we have to finish it, he said, his eyes stealing over again. Did you get the logs? Clara is pulling them now, I said. While they were celebrating in the lobby, I had IT mirror Caleb's phone. He connected to the company Wi-Fi the second he walked in. And we have the emails, I said. He didn't just sell the data, Grandpa. He promised them the patent for the new eco-engine. Grandpa closed his eyes. The eco-engine was his legacy project. It was supposed to change the shipping industry. He sold the future for a Ferrari, Grandpa whispered. We have to go to the boardroom, I said. It's time to end this. We gave them a 10-minute head start. Grandpa needed to compose himself, and I needed to verify the evidence with Clara. When we walked toward the main conference room, the atmosphere on the executive floor was electric. The employees knew something was happening. They had seen my family strut in like peacocks and then slink out of my office like wet dogs. Whispers followed us. Is that Mr. Henderson? I thought he was dead. Look at his face. Someone is getting fired. We reached the double glass doors of the boardroom. Inside, the entire board of directors was seated around the massive oval table. Mr. Tanaka, the vice chairman, sat at the head. My family, Dad, Mom, and Caleb were seated on one side, huddled together like conspirators. When we walked in, the room went silent. Dad stood up immediately. Gentlemen, ladies, this is a miracle. My father is alive. He was trying to spin it. He was trying to play the relieved son. It was nauseating. Sit down, Richard, Mr. Tanaka said. His voice was cold. Tanaka was a man of honor. He had been Grandpa's partner for 30 years. He knew exactly what kind of man my father was. I just meant, sit down. Grandpa walked to the head of the table. Mr. Tanaka stood up and offered him the chair. Grandpa took it. I stood to his right, standing, my arms crossed. This is an emergency meeting, Grandpa began, called to address a crisis of leadership and integrity. Integrity, Mom piped up. You faked your own death. How is that for integrity? You put us through emotional hell. Emotional hell? Grandpa raised an eyebrow. I heard champagne corks, Linda. I didn't hear weeping. Several board members stifled chuckles. Mom turned red. We are here to discuss the future of Henderson Global, Grandpa continued. Specifically, the attempted hostile takeover by my own family. It wasn't a takeover, Dad argued. It was succession. We thought you were dead. I am the natural heir. Let's talk about that heir status, Grandpa said. He slid a folder across the table to Dad. Open it. Dad opened the folder. He frowned. What is this? That, I said, speaking up for the first time, is a record of the withdrawals from the Employee Charity Fund over the last 24 months. The room went deadly quiet. The charity fund was sacred. It was used to help employees with medical emergencies, tuition, and disasters. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad said, sweating. Page 3, I directed. Look at the dates. Every withdrawal matches a wire transfer to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. A shell company registered to Linda Henderson. All eyes turned to Mom. She clutched her fur coat tighter. That's ridiculous. It's an investment vehicle. It's a slush fund, I said. You stole $1.2 million from the employees. And where did that money go? Did you invest it? I clicked a remote in my hand. The projector screen behind me lit up. It showed a bank statement. Online casinos, DraftKings, VIP hosts in Las Vegas, and payments to a loan shark named Vinny the Vice. Caleb made a noise like a strangled cat. Mom wasn't gambling, I said, looking at my brother. She was paying off Caleb's debts. Weren't you, Mom? He's a good boy, Mom shouted, suddenly standing up. He just had bad luck. He needed help. What was I supposed to do? Let them break his legs. So you broke the company instead? Grandpa asked. You stole from the people who work for us? From the people who clean your floors and drive your trucks? It's our money anyway, Caleb yelled. It's the family company. It's all ours eventually. We just took an advance. It is not your money, Grandpa roared, slamming his fist on the table. It belongs to the shareholders. It belongs to the employees. It is not a piggy bank for your degenerate habits. We can pay it back, Dad said desperately. Once I take over, we'll restructure, we'll sell the logistics division. You're not selling anything, Grandpa said, because you're not taking over. You can't stop me, Dad said, finding a shred of courage. I've read the bylaws. If you die or if you are incapacitated, the control reverts to the eldest son. Even if you're alive, I can petition the court to declare you unfit. You faked your death. That proves you're senile. That proves you're unstable. Dad looked around the table, seeking support from the board members. Gentlemen, look at him. He's playing games. He's endangering the stock price with these stunts. I move for a vote of no confidence. I move to remove Arthur Henderson as chairman immediately on grounds of mental instability. It was a bold move, a desperate, suicidal move, but legally he had a sliver of ground to stand on. If the board thought Grandpa was crazy, they could oust him. I second the motion, Caleb shouted. I'm a shareholder. I second it. Mr. Tanaka looked at Grandpa. Grandpa looked at me. It was time for the twist. You can't move for a vote, Richard, Grandpa said softly. Why not? I'm a board member. Because you don't have the votes, Grandpa said. You think you own 20% of the company. You think your wife owns 10%. And Caleb owns 5%. That's right, Dad said. 35%. And with the sympathetic votes from the other members, we have the majority. Actually, I said, stepping forward, you own 0%. Dad blinked. What? Tell them, Joshua, Grandpa said, leaning back in his chair. The shares you hold, I explained, are Class B non-voting shares. They were converted 10 years ago when you signed the refinancing agreement for your second mansion. You didn't read the fine print, did you, Dad? Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I signed. The lawyers said it was standard. You signed away your voting rights in exchange for a lower interest rate, I said. Typical short-term thinking. But who holds the voting power then? Caleb asked. If we don't, and Grandpa only holds 40%. Grandpa doesn't hold 40%, I said. He transferred his shares into a blind trust a year ago. And who controls the trust? Mom whispered, her face pale. I looked at her. I looked at the people who had treated me like luggage for my entire life. I do, I said. The silence in the boardroom was heavier than lead. You? Caleb laughed nervously. You? The forklift driver? The spare? You control the company? I control 51% of the voting stock, I said. Grandpa named me the sole trustee of the Henderson Family Trust 12 months ago. Every decision this board makes, every dividend payout, every executive appointment, it all requires my signature. That's a lie, Dad screamed. Show me the papers. I tossed the thick envelope Grandpa had given me onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Dad. He ripped it open. He tore through the pages, his eyes scanning frantically. This can't be legal, he muttered. Undue influence. You manipulated him. You poisoned him against us. I didn't have to poison him, I said. You did that yourselves. Every time you missed a Christmas dinner. Every time you billed a vacation to the company. Every time you treated me like an employee instead of a son. So all this time, Mom stared at me with wide eyes. When you were letting us treat you like garbage. When we fired you this morning. I was letting you dig your own grave, I said. I wanted to see how deep you would go. And you went deep, Grandpa added. Stealing from the charity fund. That's prison time, Linda. Mom started to cry. Real tears this time. Tears of terror. Arthur, please. I have a problem. I'm sick. Gambling is a disease. You can't send the mother of your grandchildren to prison. And what about me? Caleb asked, his voice trembling. I just have debts, Grandpa. I can change. I can work. I'll start in the warehouse like Joshua. I'll do anything. It's too late for the warehouse, I said. We found the emails to Vex Corp. Caleb. Caleb froze. We know about the patent, I continued. We know you met with their CEO at the golf club last Tuesday. We have the security footage. We have the bank transfer. $50,000. That's what you sold us out for? 50 grand? The engine is worth billions. I didn't send the final schematics. Caleb pleaded. I just sent the preliminary sketches. It wasn't the whole thing. It's corporate espionage, Mr. Tanaka said, his face stern. It is a federal crime. Dad slumped into his chair. He looked defeated. He looked small. So that's it, Dad whispered. You're taking everything? The company? The house? The cars? The company is already mine, I said. The house belongs to the trust, so yes, I'm evicting you. You have 30 days. The cars? Well, the cars are company property. So hand over the keys. You can't do this to your family, Dad said, looking at me with wet eyes. Joshua, son, please, we're blood. Blood, I laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. When you thought Grandpa was dead, did you care about blood? When you fired me over the phone, did you care about blood? You said it yourself, Dad. Sink or swim. It builds character. I pointed to the door. Start swimming. The climax wasn't just the reveal of the shares. It was the enforcement. Because people like my family, even when defeated, don't just leave. They cling. They bargain. They rage. I'm not leaving, Caleb shouted. He jumped up and grabbed the heavy crystal pitcher of water from the table. He looked like a cornered animal. I'm not going to jail. I'm the heir. This is my company. Put the pitcher down, Caleb, I said calmly. No, I'm taking what's mine. He hurled the pitcher. It wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at the big glass window overlooking the city. He wanted to break something. He wanted to leave a scar. The pitcher shattered against the reinforced glass. Water and shards sprayed everywhere. Security, Grandpa shouted. The doors burst open. Marcus, the head of security, walked in with 2 uniformed police officers. We've been listening from the hall, Marcus said. He looked at Caleb with pure disdain. Caleb Henderson, you are under arrest for corporate espionage and embezzlement. And Linda Henderson, the officer added, stepping toward Mom. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding the theft of charitable funds. No, Mom shrieked. She tried to hide behind Dad. Richard, do something. Call the lawyers. I can't, Dad stammered. He fired the lawyers. He controls the money. The officer grabbed Mom's wrists. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. Get your hands off her. Caleb lunged at the cop. It was a mistake. Marcus intercepted him, twisting his arm behind his back and slamming him face first onto the conference table. Stay down, Marcus growled. You're not in the VIP lounge anymore, kid. Caleb screamed as the cuffs were tightened. Ow! You're hurting me. Grandpa, help me. Grandpa stood there watching. He didn't look away. He didn't flinch. You hurt this company, Grandpa said softly. You hurt the people who trusted you. This is the consequence. Dad stood alone. He wasn't being arrested. He was too incompetent to even be part of the crimes, apparently. He just stood there, watching his wife and favorite son being dragged away. He looked at me. You planned this, he spat. You set them up. I turned on the lights, I said. They did the rest. I have no son, Dad said. You are dead to me. Funny, I replied. I thought I died when I was 18, when you gave me luggage. The police dragged Mom and Caleb out. Their screams echoed down the hallway. I have rights. Do you know who I am? Call the governor. Then, silence returned to the boardroom. The board members looked at me. They looked at Grandpa. Well, Mr. Tanaka cleared his throat. That was decisive. It was necessary, Grandpa said. He sat down heavily. He looked exhausted. The fire was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. I apologized to the board for the spectacle. It won't happen again. And the leadership? Tanaka asked. With Richard removed. Joshua is the CEO, Grandpa said. Effective immediately. I am stepping down to Chairman Emeritus. He looked at me. Take the chair, Joshua. He gestured to the head of the table. I looked at the chair. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for and everything I had lost. I walked over to it. I sat down. The leather was still warm from Grandpa. First order of business, I said, my voice steady. We initiate a full forensic audit of all executive accounts. We restock the charity fund with money from the sale of the corporate jets. We don't need 3 of them. And we send a memo to the logistics department. What does the memo say? Tanaka asked. It says their jobs are safe, I said. And everyone gets a 5% bonus this quarter. For loyalty. The board nodded. They approved. The aftermath was swift. Dad was escorted out of the building by security. He wasn't arrested, but he was stripped of his badge, his company credit cards, and his car keys. I stood by the window and watched. I saw Dad walking out to the curb. He looked lost. He reached into his pocket for his phone to call a driver, then realized he didn't have a ride. The company car was gone. He stood there on the sidewalk, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, waiting for an Uber. Grandpa came up beside me. Are you happy? He asked. No, I said. I'm not happy. They're my parents. He's my brother. But are you at peace? I thought about it. I thought about the years of insults, the feeling of being invisible, the fear that they would destroy Grandpa's legacy. Yes, I said. I'm at peace. That's enough, Grandpa said. Happiness comes later. Peace is what you build on. What happens to them now? I asked. Your mother will do time, Grandpa said. Maybe 2 years. First offense, good lawyer, if she can find one she hasn't alienated. But the gambling addiction. She needs rehab, not prison. Maybe this will force her to get it. And Caleb? Federal espionage charges are serious, Grandpa sighed. 5 years minimum. He'll come out when he's 35. Maybe then he'll be ready to start over. Maybe he'll need some luggage. We watched the Uber pull up. Dad got in. He didn't look back at the building. I need a drink, Grandpa said. Not champagne. Whiskey. I have a bottle in my office, I said. The cheap stuff, but it's good. Lead the way, Mr. CEO. We walked back to my office. The glass door was still propped open. The trash can still held the broken picture frame. I poured 2 glasses. To the future, Grandpa said, raising his glass. To the future, I echoed. We drank. It burned, but it was a good burn. A clean burn. You know, Grandpa said, looking around my modest office. You should move into the corner suite now. It's yours. Maybe next week, I said. I like the view from here. It reminds me where I started. Good answer, Grandpa smiled. That's why I chose you. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. The trust transfer was complete. I was officially the majority owner of a billion-dollar company. But looking at my grandfather, sipping whiskey in a quiet office, I realized the money didn't matter. The title didn't matter. What mattered was that the good guys won. And the bad guys, well, they were finally paying the bill. They say that winning the war is only half the battle. The real work begins when you have to rebuild the country. For the first 3 months after the boardroom purge, I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. Not because I was stressed, though the workload was immense, but because for the first time in my life I was waking up with a purpose that belonged entirely to me. The transition of power wasn't just about changing the nameplate on the CEO's door. It was about exorcising a culture of fear and entitlement that my family had allowed to fester in the shadows of Grandpa's empire. My first week as CEO, I didn't sit in the corner office. I sat in the cafeteria. I wanted the employees to see me. I wanted them to know that the man signing their checks ate the same tuna sandwiches they did. The rumor mill was on fire, of course. Everyone knew about the arrests. Everyone knew about the fake death. But instead of fear, I sensed a strange, vibrating energy in the hallways. Relief. The golden child was gone. The spare was in charge. And the spare knew how to drive a forklift. One of the first things I did was hold a town hall meeting. I stood on a small stage in the atrium, looking out at 3,000 faces. My brother wanted to sell the logistics division. I told them, speaking without a script. He wanted to buy an island. I'm not buying an island. I'm buying new trucks. I'm upgrading the software systems you've been complaining about for 5 years. And I'm reinstating the merit-based bonus structure that my father suspended. The applause wasn't polite. It was deafening. It was the sound of people realizing their jobs were safe. But while the company was healing, my biological family was disintegrating. The legal process moved with a speed that surprised even Grandpa. Because Grandpa had prepared so thoroughly, the forensic accounting, the video evidence, the mirrored phone logs, there was very little room for their high-priced defense attorneys to maneuver. Caleb's case was the first to crumble. About 6 weeks after the arrest, I received a call from Marcus, our head of security. "You might want to come down to the federal courthouse," Marcus said. "Your brother is taking a plea deal." I went, not to gloat but because I needed closure. I sat in the back row of the courtroom next to Grandpa. Caleb looked different. The tan was gone. The designer haircut had grown out and looked greasy. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He looked like a child playing dress-up in a convict costume. When the judge asked him how he pleaded to the charges of corporate espionage and wire fraud, Caleb didn't look at the judge. He looked at the gallery. He scanned the faces until he found Dad. Dad was sitting 2 rows in front of us. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. His suit was wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't shaved in days. When Caleb's eyes met Dad's, I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Guilty," Caleb whispered. "Speak up, Mr. Henderson," the judge commanded. "Guilty," Caleb shouted, his voice cracking. "I'm guilty. I did it. But he told me to. He told me it was my right." He pointed a shaking finger at Dad. Dad shrank into his seat, burying his face in his hands. It was a pathetic display. The golden child was throwing the king under the bus to save his own skin. But it didn't matter. The evidence against Caleb was physical. The evidence against Dad was merely moral incompetence. Dad hadn't broken the law, he was just too stupid to stop those who did. Caleb was sentenced to 60 months in a minimum security federal facility, followed by 3 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay restitution of $2 million. Since he had 0 assets, the Ferrari, the condo, the watches were all leased or company property. He would be paying that debt for the rest of his life. As the bailiffs led him away, he passed by our row. He stopped for a second. "Joshua," he rasped. "Josh, please. Put money on my commissary books. I can't eat the food in there. Please." I looked at him. I remembered the luggage he gave me on my 18th birthday. I remembered the champagne he popped when he thought Grandpa was dead. "Sink or swim, Caleb," I said softly. "It builds character." He screamed an obscenity at me before the doors closed. My mother's fate was more complicated, and in a way more tragic. Grandpa and I had a private meeting with her lawyer a week after Caleb's sentencing. Mom was out on bail, staying in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city because she had been evicted from the estate. The meeting was held in a neutral conference room downtown. Mom walked in wearing sunglasses and a scarf, trying to maintain the illusion of a celebrity avoiding the paparazzi. But when she took off the glasses, her eyes were red and swollen. She looked 20 years older. "Arthur," she said, ignoring me completely and looking straight at Grandpa. "This has gone on long enough. I'm ready to come home. I've learned my lesson. It was a lapse in judgment." "A lapse?" Grandpa asked, his voice steady. "You stole $1.2 million from a charity fund, Linda. You gambled it away on blackjack and baccarat while pretending to be a philanthropist. I was stressed, she cried. Living with your son. Do you know how hard it is? He's weak, Arthur. He's weak and he's needy, and I had to be the strong one. I needed an outlet. So you stole from me, Grandpa said. I borrowed. The court calls it grand larceny, Grandpa said. But there is a way to mitigate the damage. Mom perked up. The predator in her eyes woke up. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't let the family name be dragged through the mud anymore. What is it? Do you want me to sign an NDA? I'll sign it. Just drop the charges and give me my allowance back. I watched Grandpa closely. This was the moment he had told me about. The final twist. The final test. I can't drop the charges, Linda, Grandpa said. The district attorney is pursuing this. Not me. But I can write a letter to the judge. I can advocate for a suspended sentence contingent on mandatory rehabilitation. I can pay for a top-tier treatment center. You won't go to prison. You'll go to a place where you can get help. Okay, Mom said quickly. Okay, yes, that sounds acceptable. A spa retreat. I can do that. It's not a spa, Grandpa corrected. It's a lockdown facility for addiction. But here is the condition. He slid a single piece of paper across the table. You have to divorce Richard. Mom froze. What? You blame him for your stress, Grandpa said. You say he's the reason you gamble. Fine. Leave him. Sign this divorce decree. Walk away from the toxic dynamic. If you do, I will set up a small, modest trust for you. Enough to live on. Not luxury, but comfort. You get clean, you get divorced, and you get a second chance. I looked at Mom. This was her lifeline. Grandpa was offering her a way out of the hole she had dug. He was offering her dignity. Mom looked at the paper. Then she looked at the imaginary life she still thought she deserved. A modest trust? She sneered. What does that mean? 50,000 a month. 5,000 a month, Grandpa said. Plus rent. Mom laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. She shoved the paper back. 5,000? That wouldn't even cover my skincare routine. You're insulting me, Arthur. And divorce Richard? He's my husband. He's the father of the heir. When he gets his share of the estate. He has no share, I interrupted. We've been over this. The estate is gone, Mom. It's in the trust. Dad has nothing. He'll fight it, she screamed. We'll sue you. We'll take it all. I'm not signing this garbage. I'm not living like a pauper. She stood up, grabbing her bag. I'd rather go to prison than live on 5,000 a month, she declared. Grandpa looked at her with a profound sadness. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just witnessing the absolute corruption of a human soul. Then you will get your wish, Grandpa said softly. Mom stormed out. 3 weeks later, she was sentenced to 18 months in a state correctional facility. The judge cited her lack of remorse and her arrogant demeanor in court as factors for the harsh sentence. Dad didn't attend the sentencing. He was too busy trying to find a lawyer to sue Grandpa, but no one would take the case on contingency because the paperwork Grandpa had created was ironclad. That left Dad. In the end, Richard Henderson didn't go to jail. He didn't go to rehab. He just faded. I went to see him one last time. It was about 2 months after the takeover. He was living in a studio apartment in a rundown complex near the airport. It was eerily similar to the one I had lived in when I was 18. I knocked on the door. Dad opened it. He was wearing a stained t-shirt and boxer shorts. The apartment smelled of stale beer and microwave dinners. What do you want? He grunted. Come to gloat. No, I said. I brought you something. I handed him a box. He looked at it suspiciously. What is it? A bomb. Open it. He opened the box. Inside was the set of luggage he had given me 10 years ago. It was battered, scratched, and worn from use. I don't need this, he said, trying to sneer, but his lip trembled. I think you do, I said. You always said that sinking or swimming builds character. Well, Dad, you're in the water now. Mom is in prison. Caleb is in prison. You're alone. I'm still your father, he whispered. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you provided the biology, I said. But you didn't provide the parenting. Grandpa was my father. You were just the man who lived in the big house. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a check. It was for $10,000. This is from me, I said. Not the company. Not Grandpa. Me. It's enough to get you started. Get a job, Dad. Get a life. Stop waiting for someone to die so you can live. He took the check. His hands were shaking. He didn't say thank you. He didn't apologize. He just looked at the money like a starving man looking at bread. Goodbye, Richard, I said. I walked away. I didn't look back. I realized then that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely indifferent toward him. Back at the office, the cleanup was finishing. We settled the lawsuit with VexCorp regarding the stolen data. Since we had proof they knowingly purchased stolen trade secrets, they were terrified of a public trial. They agreed to a settlement that not only covered our losses but funded the new R&D wing for the eco-engine. The irony was delicious. Caleb's treason had actually ended up funding the very project he tried to destroy. 3 months in, the stock price was up 12%. The employees were happy. The toxic managers Caleb had hired were gone. I sat in my office, the corner office now, though I kept the door open, and looked at the quarterly report. Net profit, up 8%. Employee turnover, down 15%. Legal expenses, significant, but non-recurring. My intercom buzzed. It was Clara. Mr. Henderson, she said. The chairman emeritus is here to see you. Send him in, Clara. Grandpa walked in. He looked better than he had in years. The stress lines were smoothing out. He was wearing a casual blazer and holding a cane he didn't really need, mostly for style. Ready to go, kid? He asked. Go where? You promised me a ride, he said, his eyes twinkling. The Phantom has been sitting in the garage for 3 months. It's bad for the engine. I smiled. I closed my laptop. Let's go. The garage beneath the Henderson Global Tower was cool and smelled of concrete and oil. In the far corner, under a custom tarp, sat the Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was a 1965 model, black on black. It wasn't just a car. It was a cathedral on wheels. Grandpa had bought it the day the company went public in the 80s. He rarely drove it, and he never let anyone else drive it. Until today. Grandpa pulled the tarp off. The chrome grille gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The Spirit of Ecstasy ornament stood proudly on the hood. Wings swept back. Keys, Grandpa said, tossing them to me. I caught them. They were heavy, substantial. You're sure? I asked. I'm retired, he said, opening the passenger door. Retired men don't drive. We are driven. Besides, my eyesight isn't what it used to be. I might hit a pothole and spill my scotch. He chuckled and slid into the passenger seat. I walked around to the driver's side. My heart was beating a little faster. This car was the ultimate symbol of authority in our family. Caleb had begged to drive it 1,000 times. Dad had demanded to drive it. Grandpa had always said no. You don't drive the Phantom until you know where you're going, he used to say. I slid behind the wheel. The smell hit me instantly. Connolly leather, walnut wood, and the faint, lingering scent of Grandpa's pipe tobacco. It smelled like history. I turned the key. The massive V8 engine woke up with a low, polite rumble. It wasn't the aggressive roar of Caleb's Lamborghini. It was a whisper of infinite power. We rolled out of the garage and into the Chicago afternoon. The sunlight glinted off the long hood. Where to? I asked. Just drive, Grandpa said. Take Lake Shore Drive. Let's look at the water. We merged onto the highway. The car floated over the asphalt. It felt like we were disconnected from the world, gliding in a private capsule of silence. For a long time, we didn't speak. We just watched the city scroll by. The skyscrapers, the parks, the vast expanse of Lake Michigan. You did good today, Grandpa said suddenly, breaking the silence. With the quarterly meeting. I just followed the plan, I said. No, he corrected. The plan was just paper. You executed it. You stood in front of the board and you commanded the room. You didn't yell, you didn't bluster. You just led. He rolled down the window a crack, letting the breeze in. I want to tell you something, Joshua. Something I never told your father. I glanced at him. His profile was sharp against the passing scenery. When I started this company, he said, I thought I was building it for my son. I thought that's what you do. You build the castle and you give the keys to the prince. He paused, watching a sailboat bobbing on the lake. But Richard, he never wanted to build. He just wanted to be the king. He wanted the crown, but he didn't want the weight of it. And I blamed myself for a long time. I thought I failed him. You didn't fail him, I said. You gave him every opportunity. Maybe, Grandpa said. But then I watched you. I watched you in that warehouse. I watched you sweating in the summer, freezing in the winter. I watched you take orders from men half as smart as you. And I watched you never complain. Not once. He turned to face me. That's when I realized that kings aren't born, Joshua. They're forged. The fire that burned you, the neglect, the dismissal, the hard work, it burned away the entitlement. It left only the steel. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My throat felt tight. I always wondered why you didn't step in sooner, I admitted. When I was living in that closet apartment. When Dad was humiliating me at Christmas. Why did you let it happen? Because if I had stepped in, Grandpa said, his voice thick with emotion. If I had saved you, you might have turned out like them. I had to let you struggle. I had to let you become who you are. And it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. He reached over and patted my hand on the gear shift. I'm sorry, Joshua. I'm sorry for the luggage. I'm sorry for the lonely birthdays. But look at you now. I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw my own eyes. They weren't the eyes of a victim anymore. They were calm. They were assured. I'm okay, Grandpa, I said. I'm better than okay. I know, he said. The company is safe. The employees are safe. And the family, well, the family is pruned. It's painful. But sometimes you have to cut off the dead branches to save the tree. We drove past the exit for the old family estate, the one Dad had been evicted from. It was empty now, a for sale sign on the lawn. I felt nothing looking at it. It was just a house. What are you going to do now? I asked Grandpa. Really do? Me? He leaned back into the plush leather. I'm going to fish. I'm going to read all the books I bought but never opened. And I'm going to spend my dividends. Maybe I'll buy a boat. A small one. No crew. Just me. You should, I said. You earned it. And you, he said, you need to find a wife, or a husband, or a partner, whatever makes you happy. But find someone who loves Joshua, not the CEO of Henderson Global. I have Sarah, I said. She stuck with me when I was a forklift driver. Marry that girl, Grandpa said. Marry her yesterday. Loyalty is the rarest currency on earth. Rarer than this car. Rarer than the stock price. We looped back toward the city. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the skyline. The buildings turned into silhouettes of fire and glass. I thought about Caleb in his cell. I thought about Mom in her delusions. I thought about Dad in his empty apartment. They had spent their lives chasing this, the car, the view, the power. But they never understood that the power wasn't in the object. It was in the person holding the wheel. Grandpa had faked his death to show me the truth about them. But in doing so, he had shown me the truth about myself. I wasn't the spare. I was the solution. Grandpa, I said as we pulled back into the garage. Yeah, kid. I turned off the engine. The silence returned, warm and comfortable. Thank you. Not for the company, but for seeing me. Grandpa smiled. It was a genuine, unguarded smile. I always saw you, Joshua. I was just waiting for you to see yourself. He opened the door and stepped out. He didn't look back at the car. He didn't need the symbol anymore. He had passed it on. I sat there for a moment longer, gripping the wheel. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of oil and leather and victory. I stepped out of the car, locked it, and walked toward the elevator. Grandpa was waiting for me, holding the door. We went up together. Here is the truth, my friends, and if you take only one thing from my story, let it be this. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. We grow up conditioned to believe that we owe our parents and siblings everything, simply because we share DNA. We are told to tolerate abuse, neglect, and disrespect under the guise of family obligation. My father thought his bloodline gave him the right to rule. My mother thought her marriage certificate gave her the right to steal. My brother thought his birth order gave him the right to destroy. But entitlement is a poison. It rots you from the inside out. My grandfather taught me that respect is not inherited. It is earned. Character is not built in the comfort of a Porsche. It is built in the struggle of the warehouse. If you are the black sheep or the spare in your family, stop looking for their validation. You will never find it in the people who benefit from your insecurity. Build your own table. Find your own people. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to cut the dead branches to save your own life. This is the moment I took back control. Not just of the company, but of my self-worth. Thank you for listening to my journey. You guys are amazing for sticking with me through the betrayal, the schemes, and the final victory. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save yourself? Or maybe you were the underdog who proved everyone wrong. Drop a good in the comments if you agree that loyalty is thicker than blood, or share your own story of overcoming family toxicity. Your comments help more people find the story and realize they aren't alone. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. I'll see you in the next story. Stay strong and keep building.